Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the UNspecial podcast. We are a space for parents to come be heard, supported, equipped, and inspired. We're not here to tell you what to do with your child or present the latest therapies and behavior modifications. We are simply here for you. Our hope, our goal is for all parents to be in community with one another and in community with us at UNspecial. So thank you for joining us. North Park. I lived in North Park. Whereabouts? I lived on Idaho Street.
Okay. Off of Adams.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where my fiance is, but I live
Okay.
in Claremont.
Okay.
And so with my older sister, which has been awesome.
How many of you are there?
There's 4 of us.
And then Drew?
Yes. Yeah. Well, 3 girls and Drew. So plus
Okay.
his soul.
That's funny. He's like a gentle giant.
Yes. Yes, he is. It's very protective, which is awesome.
Yeah. Well, all right. So on the show today, we have a spectacular guest that I'm getting to know a little bit. I know her brother super well. He works with me on my construction business, and we're going to get some interesting insight into the mind of an educator, of an aunt to a special needs child, and a sister to a mom of a special needs kid. And so super excited to have Taylor on the show. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so a little bit about UNspecial. Kind of the inspiration behind it was sitting through so many IEP meetings and talking with families and parents and hearing their stories. I always was just super inspired by the way they lived their lives and how they went about their perspective on life with all of their challenge and their journey with special needs. And I always just felt that they needed a space to hear their stories, because me as a teacher, I would hear them and it would inspire me to teach more and really focus on my teaching to be the best role model for their child. And so I stepped away from special ed for, I moved to Idaho in 2020. I taught for 1 year where I met Drew. And then I stepped away for 3 years, started a couple businesses, and my previous track record in careers, I hopped around to a lot of careers in college, after college. And when I left special ed, I knew I would always come back. It was just a little journey that I had to take to figure some things out, but I knew there would be something in my future with special needs. And this idea of having this podcast and the space for parents has been on my mind for like 7 years since I started teaching. And I just never pulled the trigger. But it came from like sitting around fires with buddies and sharing stories from the classroom. And all of them were like, you got to write these stories down. Like these are hilarious. These are such good stories. So I started writing them down. I actually have a book being edited right now.
Yeah.
That one was kind of inspired from, it's 10 chapters of 10 stories from the classroom, and then relating it to the Bible and Jesus, kind of like Love Does by Bob Goff, if you ever read that. So that's exciting. That should be published here in the next couple months. I'll make sure to send you a copy.
Yeah. I would love that. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. So
So cool.
tell me about yourself. Who are you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Big Bear, a small town in the San Bernardino Mountains, and it was awesome. Graduated with 170 kids. So you pretty much you go to middle school and you realize you're gonna be with these guys the next 6 years of your life. 'Cause we had one middle school, one high school, and growing up, it was amazing. My whole family is just very heavily valued within the education within Big Bear. So my dad, he just retired, 35 years teaching 5th grade. My mom, she did middle school, high school. She got her doctorate, went to Riverside for a little bit, and then she just retired, finishing off as the director of education for Big Bear. And then along with that, I had, my brother was a physics teacher for a little bit, math teacher, and then my sister-in-law's a teacher. several of my cousins, and so it's just wild. And then like my grandparents were principals, and so it was awesome. It was definitely on the top of my, maybe kind of top of my head, that teaching could have been a place to go. But initially, so I went to, after high school and everything, I went to college out in Orange County, and it was amazing. Ran track there.
Okay.
And then I graduated with behavioral science, psychology. Didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I was just very family oriented, so I didn't want to go too far, and found myself in San Diego, which has been such a blessing. I love it here, and it's not too far away from home. And so I do have a twin sister, and she has 3 kiddos and lives in Big Bear, 3 under 3, which is wild. And
Yeah.
she's a Wonder Woman, so which is awesome. And then I live with my older sister and several other roommates out in Claremont area, and she's a professional singer and actress and entrepreneur herself. So it's been amazing living with her. So, yeah, and then Drew's in Idaho with his 3 amazing kids.
Wild, wild kids.
Oh, they're awesome. So very busy people.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Tell me about your road into special education.
Yeah. So when I moved down to San Diego, it was COVID time, and so a little different. But I became a behavioral technician, which essentially you go into the homes of these kids with special needs and work with them, ABA therapy, and kind of report back to a BCBA. He's pretty much the manager of all of us. The problem though was because it was COVID, our director or manager wasn't allowed to come in the home and actually help us out. So I kind of
Mm.
jumped in a bit. The kids I had were really aggressive. I have some scars, which I think any special ed teacher has,
Yeah.
but my heart just clung really hard to these families and their kids. And one of them, I think I love your podcast, because when I see these parents, and I think with special ed too, a lot of the times the mom, she would come up to me and show me these videos of her kid acting totally fine when he was 2.
Mm.
And then at 3 years old, it just complete turnaround, nonverbal. And then he had the tendency of self-harm. And so I had to look after him while doing these ABA trainings, which sometimes it was hard because, like, how many times am I going to tell you to kick a ball, for me to just mark it
Right.
on a piece of paper? So I learned a lot. I did unfortunately have to call CPS on one of the families. And so I just knew that I needed more support. And so I looked kind of back into my past of, okay, well, teaching's great. You get the summers off. Like, this is nice. So I went into my first school experience was a paraeducator. And so I did that for 2 years up in Escondido.
I talked to you on the phone a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's so
that's funny.
cool. Okay.
All right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I started teaching, down the street.
really.
Yeah,
Okay,
in Esco.
nice.
Esco's a
Yeah,
wild, that was a wild district.
it is. Very much so. Yeah, I remember listening to one of your other podcasts, and you talked a lot about just the different culture, like based around where the school's located. And it very much so, like, Escondido is kind of that lower income family space. And so just the family dynamic is a lot different. And yeah, so I loved being a paraeducator, just really understanding, a bit more about how to really work with these different kids, or just kids in general. You know, During that time as well, I became a nanny. And so when I was a nanny, the 2 girls that I was with, one of them, she had autism and just the most spunkiest joy in the world. And then her sister had brittle bones disease. And so both of them were just amazing girls. And yeah, it was just, it's just different. And then they moved to Texas, sadly. But it was kind of a blessing, because during around that time when I was a paraeducator, second year, I was assigned to this classroom, and they were it was pretty much these kids weren't allowed to have a lot of hours in the general ed because they were very like too aggressive, but they were extremely smart. And so it was awesome working with them. But 2 weeks into the second year, one of the girls who she had a lot more than just special needs, like really understanding her background. It was really intense. And she ended up throwing a walkie-talkie at the teacher's face and broke the TV. The teacher's like head was split open and bleeding everywhere, and so I'm trying to take care of the teacher while all of these kids are just traumatized, which of course you would, as like a second to fifth grader, like that's not what you want to go to school and see. So
Yeah.
it was really intense. And then the teacher just kind of went MIA. She didn't answer anyone. And so then essentially we had around seven.
She just pieced
Yeah,
out.
yeah. And so we had 7 different substitutes throughout the whole second year of my being a paraeducator. Just because people would come in and then leave. And so I found myself just printing out worksheets because I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew these kids needed to do something. And so around kind of the mid-year, I thought, okay, all these kids need right now is stability and a place to, if you're going to be somewhere for hours in a day, you want to feel safe. You want to feel like you can just have a sense of trust, right? So I knew that I knew I needed to do something. So I got my intern teaching credential. And it was interesting because during this course, instead of having a, like, being kind of a shadow with the teacher for a year, they just put you in a classroom and you were a teacher and that was your teacher hours. So
Yeah, I did the same thing.
okay. Yeah. So jumped in head first and it was pretty wild from there. So I taught for a year and yeah, I got a lot of stories. So
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into a few of them. Let's go back to your ABA days, the in-home stuff. I didn't do much in-home, so I don't have that experience. But ABA as a whole, applied behavioral analysis, this big therapy in the autism world. What are your thoughts on ABA, and how did you see it working, and how did you see it not working?
yeah, I think there's definitely pros and cons. I think the concept of really understanding, what these kids are working on and what they've progressed in and kind of seeing that is great. They really tried to implement the play kind of, play with these kids and then collect data and all of that. But there's a point where you got to think these kids just went to school, were being told to do things for hours, and then they come home and they're being told to do things for another couple of hours. They don't really get a break. And so I definitely ran into a lot of frustration with these kids. And so it was really initially my goal to, if they're trying to point to different colors, okay, well then let's paint together or let's build something together and then learn the colors rather than just sitting them down and having them point to different things. So much more of a play-based kind of mindset was my goal. And then I think my biggest I think joy out of it was building just visualizations for these kids and like visual schedules because it gave them a sense of control where instead of I'm
Yeah,
telling them, okay, I don't know, what type of game do you want to play? I'd show them different options and they point and then we play that. So it's much more of a motivational tactic than anything else. And yeah, I think I definitely brought that into the classroom as well. Of the more you give the sense of choice to these kids, the better they respond. Because I mean, even as adults, we don't like being told what to do. So like, why would these
right.
kids like that as well?
Yeah, and that's what I liked ABA, and then I didn't like it because what I didn't like about it is how they would teach it to us. Like the book would almost put the student as a project, and then you would get away from like what they actually need and what they want because you're told how to implement it. But and not all these specialists would come into my class and teach us on how to implement it, but they didn't even know anything about the student. It didn't really always work. But when you could find that intrinsic motivation for the student, that's where I really saw it working. In your in-home experience, I always thought it would be so much fun to be a fly on the wall and just see how things go down. Because I know my first classroom, I had three students with autism. They were all siblings, and it was second, third, and fourth grade. And they were all nonverbal and violent. And I was always just thinking, like, how do they do this at home? What was the vibe with the in-home stuff you were doing?
I think the hardest piece was building trust with parents because you're essentially coming in and telling the parents how to parent.
Yeah.
And so that was the hardest piece. Yeah, company, they did offer parent classes, which I think honestly is very essential in the sense of just even having that communication between two parents where that was a lot of the struggle where I saw even with my students at school is I talked to one parent and he would kind of do something a little bit different than like the mom would do something different than the dad would. And so it was this less communication, which is confusing for the kid too. So,
Mm-hmm. We're
but I think, after being a behavioral technician and really working with the parents of the students that I worked with, my respect for these parents are just beyond,
mm-hmm.
because even though I was with their kids for several hours of the day, I wasn't with them for everything. So I have a lot of respect for those families and what they're doing.
Yeah. Or would you say that parents were open to everything you were trying to teach in home, or
Some were,
yeah?
some weren't. It was very helpful when the BCBA would come in and talk to the parents as well and just explain a little bit more. I think because I started, when I was 21, 22. And so, to have someone so young come into the house and try to teach your kids something could be hard for sure.
Yeah. I always would tell my on like the hard days in class, I'd always tell my staff like we have no idea. Like we're in here for 6 hours and we know when the bus is coming, but this is the reality for families. Like this is nothing. So I'd always try and lighten it up. Like let's just give everything we got for 6 hours because if we can make their life a little bit easier at home, then let's do that. And that was kind of my
Yeah.
experience with families. It's some were open to it, some were not. It is a lot of work, obviously. Like in-home behavior management is a full time job, and kids aren't easy as it is. And then you throw in some autism there. Hey, that I can't imagine. So you're teaching. What was your IEP experience?
Yeah. That was interesting for me, I think, because jumping in head first, not really knowing, I had to learn as I went. Turned out that all of my students, so I had second to fifth grade with 11 kids, and I had 8 IEPs in 1 month, which is not really heard of, but it just so happened that all these kids, their annuals and then triannuals fell on the same month. And so it was a lot of my teaching. I don't remember not working 6 or 7 days a week, especially just getting through all the IEPs and learning how to even work with the data and understand what the parents need and then what all of the other therapies needed as well. It was totally new to me. I think it was some of them were very long. Some of them weren't as long because we were all kind of on the same page. A lot of the IEPs, though, we had to do like 2 sessions because not everyone got to talk, or the goals were just a lot more strenuous, or they didn't meet these different goals. I think for that year as well, these kids had goals, but because of the 7 substitutes and the teacher who went MIA, it just, none of them got fulfilled. So we kind of had to restart. And I could see that being a struggle with some of the parents, just hoping that their kids would be a lot further along. But circumstantially, it wasn't the case.
Yeah. IEPs, I always try to have them be like as lighthearted as possible because it definitely, there was one year that every single one was super intense. Like they were filmed and recorded and lawyers and everything involved.
Yeah, it's wild.
But those were the parents that like I felt had the most emotional ties to it and were having the hardest time. And that's kind of after those meetings, that's where I was like, man, there needs to be a space for these parents to be in community with one another.
Mm.
Because from my vantage point, they're going about it all alone, and there needs to be something. So in my last podcast, I kind of walked through some IEP stuff for some parents, but I was always like I never really did anything by the book in the classroom. I just I would have had a more holistic view of it, like a view of the
Yeah.
student. And I like to have a lot of fun. I feel like the more fun we would have in class, the more fun everybody would have. And behaviors definitely subsided because most of the time these students are bored and they're sick of us saying, like, good job, Timmy, way to go. And he's like 18 years old. So
Yes.
we would do a
Yeah.
lot of just life stuff like gardening, feeding the chickens.
It's awesome.
Yeah. My favorite activity with the high schoolers, this was in Sandpoint, is I would send them, it started off pretty shaky, but I would send them across campus to do laundry for the basketball team, but they would have to go to the janitor's office and they would all have picture schedules and like checkpoints along the way that they would have to hit. The first month, like kids were running away everywhere.
Yeah.
But by like I don't know, second, third month, they were going on their own and coming back. And for a while, I would spy on them, like in the other halls. And I remember one day the principal called me. He's like, "Oh, your students are running away." And I was like, "No, they're just going to do the laundry." And he's like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "I'm in my class." And then I was like, "Come over here. I bet you they'll come back." And then he came over and we were sitting there. And then they all come walking in. And he's like, "What are
Yeah.
you doing?" I'm like, "This is the whole goal. We're teaching independence. This is all we're doing here." But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So after that year teaching, you hung it up?
Yeah, so I think it was, I know, kind of the emotional toll, I think, it was a lot. Yeah. I have so much passion for these kids. I'm doing more, I work for STG&E now. So very different than teaching, but I still babysit every week. I volunteer as a Sunday school teacher every other Sunday. And so definitely have kids,
Yeah.
in my life still. And then, yeah, I think just lifestyle wise, some of the expectations. So when I went in, I was a guinea pig class and they wanted me to teach the general education programs to so I had 4 grades in my class. So essentially they were asking me to learn 4 different grade levels and teach these all in my one class. And there was struggles in the sense of, it sounded nice that these guys were getting the more of the general education, which was amazing, but based around the test scores or anything, or even other conferences, I was always conflicted because it was either, okay, do I go to my second grade teachers, my third grade teachers, or my fourth grade and my fifth grade? Because they were all different. And so I felt like there wasn't enough, not even support, but there wasn't enough structure where this one individual could thrive. And when you're trying to teach second grade and fifth grade in the same classroom, it's completely different. So there was kind of a sense of, I felt like I wasn't giving enough to these kids, just knowing that I wanted to learn more too, but also, like, I'll be honest, there were some days where after school I would just kind of lie on the floor and cry,
Yeah.
so it was, but yeah, my heart just totally just reaches out to these guys. And I have, a special teachers, like, we're told not to play favorites. And so I really didn't, but there's some of these kids just really stuck in my heart and, just constantly just curious about how they're doing. And yeah, so I don't think it's a forever thing that I'm going to be away from just even like education in general or the special ed population, because my heart is so tied within them. Um, just kind of taking a break right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to hit you up now that I know we're in the same parts of
Yeah.
California. I have we're probably the next year or so, we're going to roll out some online courses for
Okay.
in-home behavior stuff. Kind of a lot of the stuff I did in the classroom, if it could be implemented in the home, I think would be a huge benefit to parents. So we'll need some implementers.
Yeah. One of my, the head BCBA for the school that I went to, she's actually starting her own business where behavioral technicians actually, and like BCBAs have more of a connection within the school program, because I really believe where you have the behavioral techs who are at home with the kids talking to the parents more one-on-one, if they actually had a clear conversation and sat down and talked with the teachers, explained, okay, this is what the home situation is like, this is probably why they're acting a specific way during your class hours, then you can get a full, just like idea and perspective of what's working on and what works, what doesn't work, how can we transition, these type of concepts within the home and within the classroom. Because I think that was the hardest piece was during summer or any type of break, I'd have some kids cry to me because after a while, school became so much more of a stability and it was just predictable, which is a lot more peaceful. Whereas when they would come home, it didn't have that predictability. And so I totally agree with you, where if there was more of a concise communication with home life, therapy at home and within the classroom and therapy within the classroom, I think just that transition itself would be a lot smoother.
Yeah, the unity, because that was
Mm-hmm.
always the challenge teaching, is trying to get what we're doing in class that's working to do it at home. Because we'd hear reports or their take home log or whatever, and we would read he had a behavior, punched a hole in the wall, and then my thoughts always just went like, what's going on before, what's going on during, what's going on after. Well, there's a series of events that lead up to that, and a lot of the times they just wouldn't get to the bottom of it. A lot of it I would see as reactionary, which in the class we couldn't do that because we would have, 5, 6, 7 violent behaviors in one room. But I always thought it was amazing that the school districts would actually, like, logically thinking, if you have 7 behaviors in a room, how are any of them really going to get better? Because they all just mirror
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
And so I was always huge on inclusion, even if it wasn't the most appropriate. I just thought them experiencing life like everyone else would be a benefit. And
Mm.
it didn't go well every time, but
No, of course not. But I very much agree with you where I would, after a while, once these kids kind of started getting their routine within my class, we would up their inclusion hours, which was awesome. And so we'd either have one of the other para educators or even I would go with the kid, and just kind of work with them within the general ed. And I saw some of my students just excel in different areas, or because we knew one of my girls, she just loved the English and arts, and she wrote like a full script of her Beanie Babies, going to New York and stuff. And so she would go into this inclusion class during their English period and she would just thrive. And it was so cool because she'd come back and she'd be excited, and that wasn't all days, which is fine. And so it was amazing. And then like she would go out to the playground, and because she knew some of the students within the other classrooms, now she had friends, which was a huge thing for me, is for these guys to just really start to socialize. And so that was amazing to see. And then at the end of the year, she was able to have a school job. And so now she was like a patroller, and she got to wear the vest and she was
nice.
so excited. And it was amazing because when the whole crazy teacher thing happened, she wouldn't even go into the classroom because she was scared, which makes sense. And so it's to see her transition from barely going into the classroom to having a school job at the end of the year, it was so cool. It was awesome.
Yeah, I taught adult transition post high school
Okay.
for a year. That was probably the most fun year I had because they're just a little bit older, and I had like some mild mod, some mod severe. There was like 15 of students I had, but I remember they would go out in the community and they would work like Pizza Hut, Albertsons,
That's so
whatever.
cool.
And I remember the first day they got a paycheck. One guy came back to class and he just threw his check on the table and he was cussing, but he's like, "No, just got paid." I was like,
Yes,
"Oh,
that's so good.
that was a super big highlight." So you definitely dealt with some violence. I always enjoyed violence. I don't know why. Like my classes where, especially my first 2 years, it was very violent, even to the point where some of the students got kicked out. They had to go to, uh, what do they even call those? Like in home all the time. And I know on the staff specifically, it was very taxing. Because typically you would get staff that were very big hearted and wanting to help, but many times lacked the skill set. And so they were like prime targets to get hurt just because they didn't have like the forward thinking or be able to see the behaviors before they happened. Talk about the emotional toll on those days where it just seems like nothing goes right.
Yeah. There it was interesting. I think, when we kind of talked a little bit about these kids kind of mimicking each other in the sense of, we had some of my sweetest like second graders, they would watch the like fourth graders start throwing chairs or just like standing up and cussing at each other. So then one day the second graders would start doing that and you're just like, dude, like that's not even what are you doing? And so that was like I think where inclusion became super important was because, like this isn't like this isn't how everyone behaves. And so not only that, I think I knew when the behavior started. I full heartedly believe that every form of behavior is a sign of communication. And so when one of my kiddos, when he would act out, either like I found out like his father just went back to prison, or just like it's home life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so hard to communicate in that sense. Or one of my guys, he got super nervous around thunderstorms. And so if it was raining, like there was nothing you could do that day. And so it was just this, once you realize like these kids they're not trying to hurt me. They're not like going at me or going at other students. It's because they're trying to say something. They're trying to communicate in a way that's not coming across, which could of course be super frustrating. And so, one of my kiddos, he, was probably the most violent and I have such a huge heart for him. He, on one side, he would get very angry and he would start throwing things and like hitting and scratching other kids. And so he would have a safe space in in the back of the classroom and stuff. And it was hard in the sense of understanding, okay, is he acting out so he can skip out of class and go into the safe space? Or is he acting out because he's trying to tell me something? But we were all ProAct trained, which was helpful in the sense of just how to kind of defend yourself and how to block, without hurting the kid and that kind of thing. Was very helpful. But I loved my runner kids
Yeah, the
because
best.
they're so yeah. And one of them, he just like book it so fast. I'm like, we got to get this kid. We had what is it, like the jogathon, and he was like, just we're like, dude, you have to do that every day.
That's so
And
funny.
so there was a point where I realized you could either chase the kid or you can see what he's like, what he's doing. And so what I would do is they would start running because, still kind of having a running background, I'd catch up to them and I'd start running with them. I'm just like, where are we going?
Yeah.
And so there'd be times where they would look at me and just like, what are you doing? Like, I'm running away from you. I'm like, no, I thought we were going somewhere,
Uh,
like, take me kind of thing. And that's when it got fun because you now build more of this connection instead of constantly. I think that was hard, was really trying to tell just even the paraeducators and myself, like, we have to stop telling these kids no, or like, don't do that, because it creates more of this negative effect within the classroom instead of saying, like, you have to sit down, say, wow, like, all of these other students in my classroom, they're sitting down and you guys are doing amazing. And then that one student starts to realize, like, so this is a good behavior because this is being attended, like, because I'm focusing on that. Then the other students started to sit down. And so it was this mindset of building more of a positive atmosphere within the classroom rather than constantly telling kids no or saying, like, you can't do that. Well, kind of going back to that whole choices factor where, you know, yes, they have to finish their math and I don't know, some like spelling problem or something. And so you say, okay, do you want to do math first or spelling first? Or do you want to do math for 2 minutes, play your game for a minute and then math for 2 minutes? Or we can do math for 4 minutes and you can play your game for 5 minutes.
mhm.
And so they have the choice where now either way your task and their task is going to get done, but it's their choice and it's their positive, just like their own mind, their own choice, positive influence on what they get to do. And so I think that really helped with the behaviors as well, was kind of giving them more independence too.
Yeah, and that's such great insight of every behavior is communicating something. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's where the ball gets dropped with a lot of therapies and behavior modifications, because you just throw the book at them, and half the
Mm-hmm.
time it doesn't relate to what's going on. But like, I would do the same thing with the runners. I just would run with them, and like we would run probably a mile, and then we get back
Yeah.
to class, and then they'd be wiped out. I'm like, that was so much fun. And then it would kind of
Mm-hmm.
like try and get to the root of it. Like, why are we running? Do you need a break? Should we schedule some breaks so you can run more? I remember one student, every time we would go down the hallway to go to the track, he would just immediately book it into a room, do a lap, and come out. And then for like a while, I tried to stop it. And then I finally went to the teacher. I'm like, dude, can I just let him do it? Like, is it really that disruptive? And he was like, no. He's like, it is the highlight of our day. Every day he would
Yes.
just do a little loop in the class and run out every day. And then the like gen ed student, it would help with the vibe of special ed on
Yeah.
campus, because then the gen ed students would see him everywhere and be like, yo,
Mm-hmm.
what's up, man? But I feel like that's the mindset that's kind of like what we're trying to shift here with on special, is
Yeah.
just treat everybody normal, have fun, like stop taking it so seriously. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
land well with some parents, which is fine, because some just have very, very high expectations, which is good. Sometimes a little unrealistic in my view, but just treating them as a person and running
Yeah.
with what they like to do
Yeah.
instead of,
And they're kids,
yeah,
you know,
right.
they're just kids.
Okay, so you have a family member with special needs, and I've been talking to your sister. She's going to come on the podcast, so that'll
Fun.
that'll
Okay.
be a fun conversation. So we'll hear a bit about that story. But what is it like being an aunt?
Um, I I full heartedly believe, so it's my twin,
Mm-hmm.
her first girl, and her name is Emma Grace, and she's just the epitome of an angel. The cutest face, like when she laughs, it just lights up the room, and it's amazing. She definitely like saved my life and my mindset in so many different ways, and I think it's awesome in the sense of, I feel like having a background of working within special ed and then now having a niece with it, just being more understanding towards my twin and just kind of what she has to work through. But not only that, seeing it not exactly firsthand, but a little bit more deeper of what these parents had to go through from the beginning stages all the way to these different diagnoses, to what type of therapy should we have, what kind of school should they go to, and just so many different regulations I get to see kind of firsthand, which creates so much more of a respect for these families. But it's even then so, like I look at my twin and I know that like the Lord did not give Emma to anyone else except for her. And so I full-heartedly believe that Emma was supposed to be Maddie's daughter for a reason in so many different ways. So she's just, and she has cerebral palsy. And so it's funny because right when we got that diagnosis, turns out Maddie and I, we did the same thing. Maybe it was a twin telepathy. I don't know. But we started Googling like famous people with cerebral palsy,
Really? Yeah.
and just kind of putting a light to the whole situation of like, maybe this is what's happening, but that doesn't mean that her quality of life has to be any less than anyone else's, and so just really, but yeah, I think even family gatherings and she like the most amount of time that I can spend with Emma and just holding her, or like she loves music and so just dancing with her. I think the weirdest thing is being a twin. We have the same DNA, so technically like weird enough to say is like she's kind of half my child too, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I just feel extremely close with my twins' kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially Emma. So, but I think every time that I see her, it's like a constant, and I did this with my students too. It's a constant, like just dump of affirmations, like positive affirmations. I tell her you're going to be great. Like you're going to do great things. You're valued. You're worthy. You're going to make an amazing impact in this world. And, just, I think anyone, needs to constantly be told that they are just worth life. And they're here for a reason. So definitely trying to start that at a young age. But, yeah, I have such a huge space in my heart for little Emma Grace.
How old is she?
She is she's almost 4, 3, 4ish. And so it's yeah, but
And that's their first,
no,
the
I
first
think
one. So there's two more.
yeah, so her first yeah. So she has her first kiddo, Emma, and Koa James, which is the second, and then Milo, which is the last little guy. They're angels.
Wow.
So cute. Love them to death.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, when I say she's a superwoman, she really is. My twin. And so I mean even like with Drew's family, they had 3 under 3, so
Yeah.
it's just, I guess the
It's
Waner way a little bit.
it's in the Waners.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
next.
Oh, I know. So
What was
we'll see.
the conversation like when your sister called you when they started like on your side of things? How was it getting that phone call? Like, hey, stuff's going on. They don't really
Yeah.
know, or how did that go?
The crazy thing was when she was a little bit younger, around 2, they started to notice just different things, like she wasn't talking, she wasn't walking. And so I think in our minds, we as a family already knew that something was up. And then when the doctor started saying, oh, it's autism, in my head, I was like, it's not autism, because if she's already showing signs within autism, you don't see signs until you're around 3, like 4ish. And so then it was more of we're just going to diagnose her with something so we can get her therapy a lot easier than anything else. And so we're just like, okay, but I really appreciated just Maddie's whole mindset around it, because I think the first time she called me to really tell me that she had cerebral palsy, I asked Maddie just kind of how she felt, and she's like, it's nice to know what it is, because then we can move forward in the sense of instead of just guessing. So, but I think Maddie's just peace, but also determination to do the best that she could for her daughter it was so awesome to see. I think, yeah, I mean, like being told that is never easy. I can't say obviously it's easier for me because it's not my direct daughter, but just, yeah, it was very, very hard, but it was also a determination of, okay, like, so let's get her what she needs. Like, what does she need to have the best life possible? And so I think it's going to be really interesting to hear a little bit more, because you mentioned you'll probably talk to Maddie a little bit. And so it's going to be awesome to hear what she kind of says, just even around, the whole education process and having those different therapies for our kids. Because I can stand here and say, oh, this and this and this is right, but I'm not living with Emma every single hour of the day. So, yeah, it'll be really cool just to kind of hear more of her perspective.
Yeah. I mean, that's rad. I know probably some parents go through a denial stage where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, no, not my kid. That's not happening. But it sounds like her mama heart was like, okay, this is what it is. Let's make it happen and get after it. We had a parent on episode 3, and that was kind of the same vibe they had. The mom just got to work. She had a cry fest for a week. And then,
Yeah, it was the twins, right?
yeah, and then it was just like,
Yeah.
it's time to get to business. And then it was
Mm-hmm.
interesting on the father's side, he kind of checked out and pieced out. And I think
Yeah.
that's probably a very common route that happens. I know divorce rate in families with special needs is like north of 80%. And I can't imagine how hard that is. I mean, I have a newborn. He was a preemie, 29 weeks.
Mm.
And
Wow.
just the constant support and all night making sure he's breathing and everything. That's just like a tiny glimpse onto what a lot of these families deal with forever for the life of their
Mm.
kid. So that's that's wild. But then also, like you said, like this happened for a reason for your sister. That's the incredible mindset of, you know, life happens for you and not to you. And
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
whatever you can get out of it, but then having God at the center of it obviously is foundational to make sense of
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. No, exactly. And no, it's really awesome to see Maddie and JD just work through so many different things. And I think it's also a huge blessing that they're up in Big Bear right now, just because my parents are like 15 minutes
That's
away.
huge.
So, and they're a tremendous support. I know Maddie would definitely agree. Like it'd be hard to work just with everything, without having my parents there. So that's an amazing blessing too. And then I think even for us being like with my older sister and I, for us only being 2.5 hours away. So we try to get up there, as much as possible. And of course, that's the goal to have more time in order to do that. So
Right. What would you say were your biggest Success.
I think I kind of mentioned it a little earlier with one of my students, the girl who I saw just get the job at the end of the year. I think that one was awesome. It was when I left the class and I had one of my really good friends. She was my para educator when I was a teacher, and then I left, and so I still have that connection with her. And I would ask her, like, how are my kids doing? Like, what have they succeeded in and stuff? And she mentioned how it was awesome to see them just really progressing. Whereas the year that I was there, it was more of hey, school's not a murdering ground,
Yeah.
like your teacher's not going to leave you, that kind of thing. So I felt success in the sense of giving these kids hope again that this can be a safe space. Like school is going to be fun. I can have friends here. And so I definitely felt, I guess, guilty in a sense for leaving the classroom, but I am very happy in the sense of that I stayed the whole year. Like I actually gave these kids a stable year. Um, I would definitely see that as a success. I know my heart is by far still, like kind of like I said, like still in that community. And so my goal with kind of everything that I'm doing is having more time in the order to go back, not only in the classroom, but really kind of blend the home life or even build just safe spaces within family homes where these kids could transition from their school to their homes. And so, I've actually during summer, one of the parents asked me to babysit his kid. And so this is one of my kids who's very near and dear, and he was beyond crazy smart. He was in fourth grade doing like fifth grade math, just finishing it very quickly. He found a piano on his iPad, and I would play jazz music, and by the end of the day, he played the song like perfectly on his little iPad, this jazz song. It was wild. And so he would build sculptures. And so he was also the kid that ran away a lot and was the highest, most aggressive guy.
Right.
Right. And so, but it was like at the end of the day to have him, I guess with any of the kids to like, okay, I see what happened, which means that something is going on, talk to me, and being a safe space for these kids, and then them actually telling you what's happening. That was such an amazing feeling because then you knew that you built a trust. And I think that was, yeah, I would say that was a huge success when they were able to open up.
Yeah. What do you see as the hardest for parents? What's their biggest hardship? And what would you say that would be the most important thing they can do?
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things is seeing or even going into these IEP meetings and seeing that they haven't completed a goal. Or there was one point in my class where one kid started beating up another kid, so then the parents were upset, like, why is this happening? And so kind of really expressing that your kid is in this classroom where some of the other students are violent, and then the parents are like, well, why, like, why is he in there? And then you have to explain, like, well, because your kid is one of the violent ones, and so it's like it's hard. It's very building trust, I think, with the parents is hard. But not only that, I think the hard piece for them is to have trust in the teacher that their kids are going to be safe at school, that they're doing the right thing by putting them in this specific class, that their kid is going to progress or even be able to have more inclusion hours. And so I mean, I'm not a parent, so I don't know how hard it is to even let someone else teach your kid for a couple hours of the day. I would say for parents, though, the biggest thing is high communication. If the teacher doesn't know what's happening at home, and they push something or like have this kid do a little bit more, but he just had something crazy happen at home, and now the teacher's upset because the kid is acting out. But something, so it's like if there was an easier form of communication, or just like constant, yeah, I guess just constant communication is always big. I think my favorite piece was the parent teacher conferences, because then we did have that one-on-one. And so just being completely honest with the teacher that you're working with, have a high level of communication with them, tell them what you want to see, like what are you excited about, what are your hopes for your own kid too. So yeah, I think definitely communication for sure.
Yeah, and just the realization that the parent knows their child better than anybody. And I would say, like, for all the parents not to take that lightly, like, make sure to say it and voice what you want and what you need. Because a lot of times I would experience not much communication. And as a teacher, that's why we're there, to make their life easier and create independence in their child. And so those insights from families was always huge and important
Yeah.
in how
Yeah.
to, you know, plan their days and activities and stuff. Like, if one
Yeah.
parent, like, I want my son to sing in the school play, cool. We can make a full on curriculum around getting him ready to sing in the play. But
Mhm.
just those little things.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up here. I got two more questions. Two more questions. You got any funny stories?
I think just the honesty
Yeah.
was
No
amazing.
filter.
So no filter at all. And so, okay, I got three on the top of my head.
Yes.
So I was standing in the front of my class, and one of my students, she raised her hand, and she was like, "Miss Waner, you have to stop talking. Your voice is gonna hurt." I was like, "Thank you." And I got to teach today.
He's telling you to shut up.
Yes, yes, and like the most in the kindest way
Uh,
possible. It was great. I had another kid. He raised his hand, and he was just he said, "Miss Ware, can I smash your computer?" I said, "No, but you can smash your blocks later, but thank you so much for asking for
yeah.
permission, before you did it, before you tried." That was a good one. Another one of the same students, they raised their hand and said, "Wow, you look like 60% man today." I said, "Thank you." Like, that's what I was going for. That was a good one.
That's great.
But man, it was like I loved when they found their niche. And so many of my students, they would express themselves through pictures. And so they would draw cartoons, and we would do this lesson, and they would draw a full cartoon page of what the lesson was. One of my guys, he was nonverbal, but he would draw out exactly what I talked about. I'm just like, well, of course, like, you understand,
Yeah.
so it was amazing what these kiddos just knew and understood, and that was awesome. It was so cool working with them.
That was always so much fun being able to pull that out of them.
Hmm.
Or you would like get a little cue into what makes them tick or something going on. And then you kind of poke into it more and more and more. And then they would
Yeah,
come out with like that, a full animation of what you're talking about. And you're like, that is
you're like,
incredible.
wow, yeah, you're like, I draw stick figures.
Right.
This is great.
Yeah. All right. What would you say? What would you say to parents? What do you want parents to know? I know I'm special. We just want all parents to be heard. We want them to know that they are equipped to do this journey, that they have what it takes, and just pump as much affirmation to them as possible because they truly are. Every parent that I've come across, there's just incredible people. And I know so many of us, I learned from them, I learned from their student, and I know everybody can just be completely inspired by them. But I think sometimes they need to hear that. They need to know.
Yeah,
So what would you say?
definitely. I believe that the Lord didn't give them this son or daughter for, like, it wasn't an accident. He knew that this parent, mom and dad, would have the strength in order to work through it. And I know for a lot of parents, like you were mentioning, just the divorce rate too, where it's, I think there's so much voice in working together, communicating together, and just they're incredible. I think definitely human forms of superheroes, uh, and just the patience that I've seen with these parents, and just the love that they do have for their kids, and just wanting the best for their kids is amazing. And so I would definitely tell them that they're strong, that they're valued, they're worth just even a voice too. And just seek help, when needed, and there's no shame in asking for help, and banding, like, coming together, building a community with other families who are working on the same thing. I think, which is why it's amazing what you're doing, because I know that's your whole intentionality of bringing parents closer together. But it's just these kids are such a light in the world. And so I don't want the parents to ever feel like they're a burden.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I just, like I was saying, I have such a high respect for any parent who has a special need kiddo. But their kids are needed in this world. They bring such a pure form of love and authenticity and honesty, and the not even the lack of filter, but the sense of self sometimes they don't care what other people are thinking as much as other general population, right? And it brings so much more joy to everyone around. And so that their kids are such a blessing, I think is, and I don't think the parents, they're doing the best they can as well. And so I'm excited to hear more stories too, just kind of on your podcast with these other families, because I wish so much so as a teacher, I sat down and talked with the parents longer. And even like I'm saying, the parents need to have a higher form of communication, but I knew I needed to have a lot higher form of communication with my parents too.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. You said their kids are needed in this world. I feel like that's the mindset shift that needs to change just in general in the world, because a lot of times they see special needs community as a problem or a mistake, or like they don't have a place. But there hasn't ever been anybody I've come across that wasn't blessed by being around a special ed kid.
Yeah.
It's just getting past
Very
that initial barrier. And then it's like, when you get all the Downs kids breakdancing at the school dances.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
there's such a pure joy. Yeah. Yeah. It's like when God tells us to have a childlike faith, and just to have that form of joy where it's like you have these kids are full of it. And so we can learn so much. By just, understanding that this is life. So it's amazing, and they're very much so a blessing.
Yeah. And that's kind of the inspiration in the book I wrote. It's called Special Days, God and Special Education.
Yeah.
And
that's cool.
That's trying to pull some of those characteristics out of the students and the stories I had, just to show like they are such a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Taylor, that was an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed your insight and just your heart towards the community. I'm pretty confident you're not done.
I don't think so.
On a little detour. I think we share a lot of the same mindsets around this, so that's super inspiring and encouraging. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for reaching out, talking to my brother.
Yeah.
So, it's been good. This has been really awesome. Thank you so much, Zack.
Yeah, for sure. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Bye. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks for watching another episode of the UNspecial podcast. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share. You can find us at UNspecial LLC on Instagram, unspecialllc.com, and we would love to hear your feedback and have you on the show. Thanks again.